What is neurofeedback?
Neurofeedback is a training process. It's based on the principles of operant learning, which just means that you're learning to self-regulate. So neurofeedback is essentially teaching self-regulation. We're using the brain waves to do that. So the EEG measures the electrical activity that's occurring as the neurons communicate, when the brain's communicating with different lobes within itself or with the body. We train the brain to be in a more desirable rhythm, and the person is controlling that, and they have awarenesses that go along with it, so they're able to notice while they're doing the neurofeedback training that they may be in a certain state and what that feels like. And then when they leave the session in their life, they may recognize that very same state. And the things that we used in the office, the tools to change from that state to a different state, they can then utilize in their daily life to make changes in their life.
Can you describe, if someone's never seen it, can you describe what the tools are?
So the brain map is going to measure the electrical activity in different areas of the brain. We know different areas of the brain are associated with different functions. We're getting a little bit further in our understanding of neuroscience now to understand networks and the way that the lobes work between each other for specific symptoms. So we start by doing a brain map. It measures 19 different sites on the brain at the scalp level, and it's the electricity. That electricity, the amounts of electricity being generated at the site, is projected onto an image of the human brain. So you're able to see which areas of your brain have higher electrical activity and lower electrical activity. We can use the knowledge we have about the brain and the function of the brain to sort of make some determinations about what's happening within the brain. However, it's always more important what's happening in your life, because the brain adapts to what's going on. So we don't get a diagnosis from the map. It's just giving us information to work with. And that's where we start our training process. We might start with an area that has a little increased activity or a little bit decreased activity. So after the brain map, we move into neurofeedback training. The training sessions themselves consist of watching a screen. You're simply watching a screen and watching the movement on the screen. For example, Pac-Man is one of the games we play. I have electrodes on your head. I'm measuring the electricity, and as the brain waves are in a more appropriate rhythm, depending on what your map was, then you're going to get movement with the video game on the screen that you're watching. Your brain wants that continuous activity. It wants the movement on the screen. So it's going to move itself towards that, which in time, the brain's going to learn a new pattern, and then that becomes the default mode. And many people see an improvement in their symptoms as that occurs. So neurofeedback's been studied for a variety of conditions. There's literature regarding neurofeedback training for migraines, for chronic pain, for addiction, for many of our medical diagnoses. I'm being very careful not to treat medical diagnoses in this practice. The indication for neurofeedback is actually stress management. And if you go back to the root of some of these symptoms and diseases that we're seeing, we find that stress is the root of the symptoms. So the brain has a typical pattern when it's stressed. And so if we can identify that pattern and train it away from that pattern, or even just to recognize that it is stressed and then be able to intervene with it, then we can make a difference. So the symptom management is occurring at the level of self-regulation and being able to control the stressors better. Once you're able to control the stressors better and you decrease the overall stress in your life, then whatever symptoms someone presented with may begin to improve. So my neurofeedback practice differs from some others in a couple of ways. One is the technical aspect. I am using Z-score training. Z-score training is based on a database. The database consists of neurotypical individuals. The database is defined by individuals with no mental health diagnoses and no first-degree relative with mental health diagnoses. So I'm using this database and Z-scores, how far someone's measurements are from this database to make determinations. This Z-score methodology and the Z-score in the training isn't used with all neurofeedback training. So that's one of the things that really separates me and what I'm doing. Neurologists use EEG to evaluate the electrical activity of the brain to look for seizures. The difference in the EEG that we're using with the neurofeedback training is that it is a quantitative EEG. If you think about a rainbow and a prism, and when you put a prism in front of a rainbow, you split it into different colors. So the same thing happens with the EEG. Neurologists look at the EEG, the raw waveforms. The quantitative EEG sort of puts a prism on it, and then we break it into colors. So if you think of the types of brain waves as the colors in a rainbow, we start with the beta waves. The beta waves are the waves that we use when we're thinking, when we're engaging, when we're processing. They're really important waves for day-to-day life. However, if we get too many of them, then that can lead to feeling kind of anxious, overdone. So we balance those waves with alpha waves. Alpha waves are conscious, calming waves. Those we get as soon as we close our eyes, so we can balance out the beta and the activity. So both of those occur on a conscious level. We see alpha with meditation, when you're consciously trying to calm yourself. The slower waves that we work with in neurofeedback training are theta waves and delta waves. So the theta waves are a state that is in between a sleeping and a wakefulness state. Those waves are very healing. When we have trauma, many times we pull those waves out to protect us. They're also very creative, but they also make it hard for our beta to do what it needs to do. So we're learning to balance those things in neurofeedback. The final wave is the delta wave. The delta wave is the slow restorative wave when you're in a deep, deep sleep. The brain even uses delta waves when we get concussions, when we get injuries, and the brain shuts down completely so that it can heal. So healing and restoration is occurring in the delta waves. The delta waves are important, but we don't want the delta waves when we're awake. So what waves we have at any given time are important. The neurofeedback training allows you to regulate those waves and to bring the types of waves that you need in at any given time. As someone is doing neurofeedback training, opportunities present because as the brain shifts into different rhythms, they may feel certain things. If they're able to talk about that, even if they begin to feel anxious, it's an opportunity. It's not a bad thing. It's an opportunity to work with the anxiety. So that's where I start to bring in things like fidgets, and does that help an individual shift their brain waves? We talk about things like mindfulness and meditation. I use body mechanics using progressive relaxation. I'm also a registered yoga instructor, so I like to pull yoga in where I can for that mind-body connection. So you really have the opportunity while you're doing the neurofeedback training to recognize your state of mind and then what to do with that state of mind. So that's what's happening during the session. I love doing neurofeedback because I get to work with a variety of people. I see something different every single day. It's not a map, it's not the brain waves, it's not this pattern, it's this person. And I get to sit with a person, and I'm honored to be with them on their journey as they discover their awareness and as they make changes in their lives. So I'm part of their journey. I'm not doing something to them, I'm watching them heal themselves, and that is my favorite.